This is Joseph Coco. I'm at Space 2014 on behalf of Becky Hilburn's Art Process blog, Keep on Truckin' Natto Soup. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure, my name is Ken Eppstein, and I run Nick's Comics out of Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, that's great. So, you're what's bringing you to Space this year? Obviously, running a comic book shop and being local to Columbus.
Actually, I'm just a publisher. I don't run a shop.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. But I've been here 4 years in a row now. I started publishing comics about 4 years ago after I closed up a record shop. We talked about that earlier, so that's where the confusion happened.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, I don't know how old Space is. Were you here since the beginning? No, it's been running 10 to 15
year of Space.
Yeah.
So no, I'm a relative newbie even with 4 years under my belt.
Yeah.
It's really, I hate to sound like a hometown cheerleader, but it's really the best show. Like, I've gone to SBX and Mocha and 8 and all of those shows, but this one just kind of hits at the right level where, you're not, it's all people of a similar caliber of art and financial resources and stuff. So, there's no big names sucking out in the air out of the room for everybody else.
Right. Bob is great in that he's trying to make it affordable for everyone, and thankfully that means he's not shelling out large amounts of money to get the big name people here.
And I don't think you need them, because there's nothing more powerful than somebody saying, I took my time and my hard-earned money to make this and look at it.
Yeah.
And people can't turn that down. People love that, and this is a room full of 150 people who've done that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's kind of what makes Space special.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's much more casual since people aren't necessarily shilling out large amounts of money to come here. The food is relatively inexpensive. The hotel is relatively inexpensive. So
it is, and it's a great introduction to kind of what Columbus is about, in the sense that because the financial stuff is so low key here that it's not expensive to live here or start a project here. The barriers for entry are pretty low. Pretty much anybody who wants to start publishing comics can figure out a way to do it here.
Yeah.
Or start a show like this and figure out how to do it.
That works as well. Well, Bob's put a lot of work into this. So.
Yeah, well.
So can you tell us a little bit about how long you've been making comics?
4 years now.
Okay.
I had been running the record store, but it kind of came to a natural end. I was not a very good retailer.
Okay.
But I sold off all the merchandise, wrote a bunch of stories, and used the money from the merchandise to hire artists and pay for printing and kind of launch myself as a publisher.
That's great. So you kind of traded out one business for another.
I did, and I am much better at this than I ever was at being a record store guy.
Yeah, well, you've got a great art style. So
well, and I had a vision for what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do was do comics for kind of some of the music fans that have been left behind. Historically, comics and music have been strongly interlinked, and I feel like that's kind of drifted apart now. Maybe video games have taken over where video games and comics have a stronger.
I can see that, certainly with webcomics, video games and comics.
But comics can sell great at record stores. Most of my books I sell at record stores as opposed to comic stores, and it works out pretty well. So that's kind of been my focus, and so I started off with a quarterly what I call a rock and roll horror anthology. So it's like Tales from the Crypt, but most of the stories are music themed, punk rock themed in some way, and all the stories are I wanted it to be like a good punk rock record, like a good Ramones record or a good Cramps record. So lots of quick, short, little twisted fables, with that kind of overarching, theme of easily accessed DIY music.
Yeah. I'm familiar with Sean Crystal's work. He does Ink Pulp Audio webcasts, and he always asks his fans, did you come from metal, did you come from punk, or did you come from rock and roll? Right. And it seems like everyone has a story about how music influenced them, so I could definitely see record stores being highly influential in the comics realm.
Right, exactly. And I think the best way I've ever heard it put was, when you do music comics, what you need to do is do comics that are informed by the music, as opposed to direct representation. So you don't have to beat people over the head with, this is a rock and roll magazine,
Yeah.
Not everything has to be stolen song lyrics. You just have to bring that same atmosphere as the genre of music that you like to the comics, and it kind of happens naturally. And give the reader enough to just kind of find their way.
So that they can feel their way, through the music
for instance,
scene.
I think for the second issue of my Western, the first one had the very obvious, the illustrator was a musician, so we did a record and made it fancy, which people love, and it's great.
Oh, yeah.
The second issue, the only real music information is that cover, which is pretty much inspired by the Clash's second album, Give Them Enough Rope.
So it's just a casual throwback, but
it's a casual throwback. Some of the character names are obscure musicians for people who like Easter eggs, like that kind of thing. But that's really all you need, because people will pick up on it, people will get it. It's kind of playing a long game, because they won't get it right away. And like any joke, if you explain it to them on their own, they'll hate it. But it really it's really rewarding when you build from the bottom like that and do it, I guess, atmospherically, as opposed to being a direct riff on any of that stuff.
I can see the music in some of the more subtle parts of the comics. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you go about selling comics in a record store? I know you probably had close ties with the...
It's grassroots. You walk into a record store with a pile of comics and say, "Hey, I have these. Will you buy them wholesale?" And a lot of the times the answer is no, which is fine.
Yeah. At that point, do you try to pitch consignment deals with them, or it's just you walk out and say...
I'm not a fan of extended bookkeeping deals, and consignment, consignment's tough, because then you have to have the kind of relationship where you're consistently asking people for money instead of just asking them for money once.
Yeah.
And also, having been a retailer myself, I know you're more invested in selling something that you've actually already paid for.
Right.
Because, when it's on consignment, no big deal. It doesn't sell.
It's just sitting there, and if people want it, they'll pick it up. But
if you've dropped, $50 on an order, you want to sell some of it to at least make your money back. So, I'm not big on consignment. I do in some places. Generally with business owners who are, close friends already or something like that. But not as a regular professional thing. I really don't like doing consignment.
Okay. And would you recommend comic artists whose comics aren't necessarily musically inspired to try to, expand into record stores as well, or you don't think it's necessary unless it's...
I think they should find their own niche. I think just like to do good writing, you have to be writing about experiences other than what you're writing about. Like, I think a lot, you can tell a comic that's been written by somebody who's just a comic fan, as opposed to somebody who has a wide range of interests. So I think that you need to seek out the places that support your interests, because you never know, because beyond the record stores, I sell these in just weird places like coffee shops. My barber sells them for me.
That's great.
And it's about building the relationships, and I think the idea of forcing the relationship could put you in trouble.
Okay, I can see that. So don't just treat a particular place as like the end-all be-all of where you want to sell your comics. Not a comic book store, not a record shop. Just kind of think about where your stuff would fit in.
And think about where it fits, and be open to just talking about your comics all the time, and you might be surprised with it, like a barber shop.
So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences at Space? I believe you're one of the, other than Bob, I believe you're one of the people who's been coming here the longest that I've spoken to.
Really?
Yeah.
Starting to feel old then.
No. 4 years.
4 years isn't that long. Space I kind of enjoyed from the get-go. It was embarrassing because the first year I went to Space, I'd never heard of it, even though I'd lived in Columbus for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was a real eye-opener, because you think when you're doing any sort of art on your own, particularly something that's written where you cloister yourself away, you think you're the only one doing it.
Yeah.
And then to all of a sudden be in a room where you're not only with 150 other people who do it,
but many of them are local.
Many of them are local, and many of them have been doing it for 15 years already or more. So that was an eye opener for me, and it made me really embrace the community here locally, and inspired me to make sure I can not only help myself, but it made me realize that by helping out my peers, all boats rise with the tide and such. If I support Max Inc. or Bob Corby, then they support me in turn. And, all of our social networking starts working together and really building what's a loose scene into an actual community. That's, to me, space is kind of a once-a-year celebration of that.
Yeah.
A chance to...
So you found that it's harder to build those sort of relationships at SPX or MochaFest, for instance?
Yeah. I mean...
is that just because you don't feel like you're part of the community there? I mean,
it's a community you have to break into.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And sometimes it doesn't work. Just like going into a record store and asking them to sell comics doesn't always work. Going up to a group of strangers who are still your peers doesn't always generate that instant feeling of camaraderie in Philadelphia and all that crap. I mean, maybe it's because I swear a lot when I talk to them. But it's all work, and the shows like Mocha and SPX, it's work and there's an expense. Just $300 for a table and a hotel room and all your travel expenses. It's a pretty deep investment. So if you're not going for if you're looking at it as a network and business growth thing, there isn't necessarily that immediate dividend.
Yeah.
But while I'm bad mouthing them, I should say that went to SPX Net last year and tabled next to Pete Friedrich from Look Mom Comics, and that led directly to a Kickstarter that I just ran.
Oh, that's great.
Completed, where I reprinted Pure Entertainment #4 from the 80s, which had a bunch of great guys like Bob Camp and Steve Mellor and Dave Simons, and before they were actual names. So it's not always the money you walk away with, and it's not.
Yeah. There's benefits to both, basically. You just feel more at home at a convention-like space.
At the same time, I could have been sat next to somebody who I didn't hit it off with, who I didn't have a lot of common interest in. It's kind of serendipitous.
Yeah. So where could we find you online? Some of your comics, maybe?
Nixcomics.com. NIXcomics.com.
Okay. And is there any advice you would have to give to someone who's considering coming to space for the first time?
Come to space for the first time?
Yeah. An artist, not...
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm always hesitant for those blanket advice questions in interviews.
Yeah, that's fine.
For everybody, it's different. Some people are naturally gregarious and good at this kind of thing, and they would have a different set of advice from somebody who might be more introverted or, less experienced.
Yeah.
I would say if you're coming to space, be willing to be a communicator in whatever manner it takes. If you have to do it through signs, do it through signs. But just
so someone doesn't
to be open once you're here.
Yeah.
And explore Columbus. Take them maybe a couple extra days to go to the cartoon library, go to the Columbus Museum downtown. This is a great city with a lot to offer. So I think at any show, whenever I go to any show actually out of town, I try to take a couple of days to check out the city.
Yep.
And then Columbus. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope you have a good space.
I appreciate it.
Okay.